All right, good morning to all. Happy Monday. Or is that an oxymoron? I don't know. No, it's okay, right? Good weekend, everybody? Yeah? Kind of rained quite a bit, though, hey? Yeah, hard to get outside. Yeah, we actually got hail by our place a little bit. Just really small little hail bits. Yeah. Um, let's see who's here. So Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Awais is here. Good morning to you, sir. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Um, Hamad is here. Good morning, Hamad. And Elizabeth is here. Good morning. So just before we start, I think we should probably do another quiz at the end of this week because if my calculations are correct, this is week 5. Is that right? That's insane. That's going way too fast. So, so we have to kind of get on top of these things. So we'll do another quiz on Friday. I'll post the sort of range of classes that we'll deal with. Maybe a little later today if I can. And then we'll go ahead and do quiz on Friday, the same as we did last time, okay? Yes, but I'll post that in Teams so that there's some kind of official notice of it, okay? All right, other than that, let's go. Oh, and Reza's here too. Good morning. Good morning to you, Reza. So, where were we? On Friday, we had just finished watching the documentary on Adam Pearson, right? And we said that ableism is a kind of type of oppression that affects Adam's life and the life of other disabled people, right? And we were using what Adam told us and to talk a little bit about the elements of external and internal, external and structural privilege and internal and attitudinal privilege, right? So our external elements of privilege were these, right? The integration of dominant group norms, the construction of what's normal and not normal, and the invisibility of privilege, right? And so I suggested that with ableism, ableism's an interesting one because, again, because we're a lot of the what am I trying to say? A lot of the external aspects of privilege are actually physical things that we can see and experience in the world, and so it's a little easier to kind of get your head around and understand, right? So here again on a bus, you can see that if you are, if you have a disability, if you have a mobility issue, if you have, if you happen to be larger than average, then buses are going to cause a problem for you, right? And I know here in Vancouver we have those fancy buses with the ramp that comes down. Have you ever seen those? It goes bzzz, yeah. And those are fantastic, but they're still kind of new. I mean, this is gonna make me sound old, so I'm sorry for that. Um, but when I used to get on the bus and go to school, there were no ramps, right? You had to like go, good morning. You had to like go up the stairs onto the bus. And so, for people with mobility issues, they weren't getting on that bus. And I'm sure that all of you have probably experienced buses like that, older style buses as well. And so, yeah, there's real physical barriers for people with disabilities in the society, right? Sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's just the physical design of the environment, right? So if where you're living doesn't have these little curb cuts, then yeah, it can be difficult or dangerous to even cross the street, right? We talked a little bit about I guess I don't have that. Oh, there we go. We talked a little bit about the construction of what's normal and not normal, right? And so I said here were two faces, right? Actor Steve Carell on the right and Adam Pearson, of course, on the left. And these are two very different faces, right? But one of them society would define as a not normal face, and one of them is a very normal face. But again, I ask you, where's the dividing line between normal and not normal, right? These two faces kind of function the same. They have the same parts arranged in mostly the same configuration, and so and they do similar things. And so, how do we decide what a normal face is and what an abnormal face is, and who gets to make that decision, right? What did I do here? For the internal ones, for the internal and attitudinal elements of privilege, we see that people in the dominant group believe they have a right to their position and that their group is superior, and often they're not too interested in kind of learning about the minoritized group or listening to their experience, right? So, I think I've got some, oh yeah. So, when we read the fictional story, we saw, I'm just going to jump to this one. We saw that the privileged group felt comfortable kind of invading the space of the minoritized group. So the three-eyed people felt comfortable invading the space of the two-eyed people. The three-eyed people felt qualified to represent the experience of minoritized persons. And so again, that the play that our character saw was all about how a three-eyed person lost their third eye, right? And so they wrote a play about it, right? And the play was probably written by three-eyed people for three-eyed people, starring a three-eyed person. And so, good morning. And so the question was, were they able to, or should they be able to represent that two-eyed experience, not having had it, right? And again, that can be tricky, and we can talk about that a little bit later in another context. So members of the privileged group see themselves as superior, right? The doctor feels that he can fix this person, and they often live separate from, or they may live separate from the minoritized group. And so the last thing we did on Friday was we watched the video with Sinead Burke, right? And Sinead did a little TED Talk, and she told us about some of the barriers that she experiences because of her disability. But I also challenge you to think about whether, should we consider Sinead as a disabled person, or is the world simply not built for her? Right? Because she can walk around just like you and I. She can see, she can hear, she can use her hands, right? In some ways, she does not have a real disability, but her disability is the fact that she lives in a world that's not designed for her, right? What were some of the things that she mentioned? Can you remember back? I know it's a long time. She mentioned some external or structural elements of privilege, right? Ways in which the world was not designed for her. Do you remember some of the things that she highlighted? She talked about the airport, the coffee shop, the bathroom, the clothing store. Yeah. So what about the airport was challenging for Sinead? No, you have no recollection of this? You don't remember her? She's the little person? Yes, there we go. Yeah, Sinead's the little person. Yeah. So Basil says here she couldn't carry her luggage, right? So when we all go through security and you put it on the little rollers and it goes through the X-ray machine, she can't lift her suitcase onto that because she's not lifting it up to here. She's lifting it like over her head, right? So that's pretty challenging for her, right? Basil said she had to be put in a not put in a wheelchair, but they wheeled her around the airport in a wheelchair. And she doesn't need one, but it's just such a long walk when your legs are that short that was the solution they used. But again, she doesn't really need to use that wheelchair, right? She was talking about, this was in the bathroom, I think Sean's talking about, right? Where sometimes she can't reach the lock on the door, right? And so how does she lock the door? Like, what does she do? She what? Yeah, she kind of uses her phone, right? She says she's got her iPhone. It's about 5 inches long, so she's got a little bit of extra reach, right? Or if that doesn't work, what does she? Yeah, she has to ask a stranger to sort of stand guard outside the door. Which, is that something that you would enjoy doing? No. On a regular basis? No, right? Um, oh yes. Basil says that yeah, she used a bin to stand up, so a garbage can, right? So sometimes she'll use that to to stand on. But again, she points out, is that safe? Probably not, right? Is it clean? Eh, maybe not so much, right? What about washing her hands? What's that? Same thing. Can't reach, right? The sink is like up here. You can't really wash your hands like that. Can she see herself in the mirror? No, because the mirror is too high as well, right? Um, and she mentioned that she could go to yeah she uses sanitizer. She said that sometimes she uses those accessible bathrooms, right? Those wheelchair accessible bathrooms, and in those the sink is sometimes lower and the mirror is kind of angled down so that she can see herself. So that's good. But what's wrong with the toilet? Yeah, it's too high, right? The toilet is made higher so that it's easier to move from your wheelchair to the toilet and back, right? So for her, half of the bathroom works, and then half of it is even worse than it was before. Um, what's the problem at the coffee shop? Right. So the cashier can't really see her when she's in line, right? And then she gets up, she orders her coffee, and where?
On the slab.
What's that?
On the slab, right? Too much.
Yeah, but and sometimes it's put way up high, right? Like at good morning, like at Tim Hortons just down the road, you get your coffee on that high platform, right? She can't reach that, right? And so if there's no lid on it, it's dangerous, right? This hot boiling liquid up there that you have to grab, dangerous, right? Um, what about at the clothing store? Well, yeah, she is a kid size, right? And so, but again, she's not a kid. She's a mature, sophisticated, intelligent woman, right? She doesn't want to wear Dora the Explorer T-shirts, right? That's humiliating, right? But again, if she goes to any fashionable women's clothing store, they will not have her size, right? She's too far outside of what society has described as normal for her to find anything, right? So finding clothes, finding shoes is a challenge, right? Good morning. Actually, it's a challenge even for you know people who are more average in their size, but for her it's a real challenge, right? Did she talk about any internal or attitudinal things? I remember in the video she mentioned that some people that people take pictures of her all the time, right? Because she's tiny, right? Um, is that a polite thing to do? No, right? You don't take pictures of people without their consent, right? That's not polite. That's not what you should do. But it happens to her very, very frequently, right? Very frequently. Um, why do you think? Why do you think people feel like it's okay to take pictures of her?
Just think she's a kid.
Maybe. I think they kind of know she's not, but what's that? That would be weirder. I think you're right. That would be weirder. Um, but why? Yeah, why do you think? Why is it okay to take her picture? Is she what? Well, yeah, she is different from many other people, right? So, I think that's why they're taking the picture in the first place, right? They want to send it to their friends and say, "Oh my God, look how small this woman is," right? But why do they think it's okay? Or why do they think they can get away with it?
Maybe because back in the day they used to have freak shows and maybe like they think, oh, she
Yeah, I guess that could be part of it, right? So Sinead says that the word midget is a slur, right? It's an offensive term, and it comes from these sort of freak shows that used to be a part of circuses kind of in the old days, right? So it's almost like there's a historical precedent of kind of, gawking at these people, right? Staring at them and saying, "Oh, look how weird they are," kind of thing, right? Yeah, so that's pretty good. There's a historical precedent here for sure. Zarta says they think she's different from she's different from normal people and objectifies her by taking pictures. Yeah. Um, do you think that's maybe what's happening? Like, because people think she's different, then different rules apply? Like, social norms don't apply anymore? Right? I think we kind of saw that with Adam Pearson, right? We saw that, you know, he went out, for drinks, and there was, this guy saying, "Oh, I know you, I love you, come here, give me a hug," and there was the woman talking to Dan, the soldier, in the wheelchair, and again, the regular, there was alcohol involved too. We should probably remember that, but it's like the normal rules don't apply, and that's kind of what Adam and I think both Adam and Sinead said that they're public property, right? And so they're kind of a thing that is owned by the public, and you can sort of do what you want, right? And of course you cannot, but it, it, some people feel like the regular social norms don't apply, right? When you're dealing with someone in a minoritized group, and of course they absolutely do, but this is an internalized dominance thing that's being acted out. Anything else that we should point out from Sinead's TED Talk? And again, I know it was a few days ago, so it's not fresh in the memory, but okay. So, oh yeah, so that was the video. Okay, let's wrap this up. This is just a short, ableism is just a short unit. It was meant to be shorter, but it's just a short one. Again, people with disabilities are, in general, are oppressed in modern societies, okay? And so people with disabilities can, that disability can be manifested in a bunch of different ways, right? We said there can be sort of sensory disabilities in terms of your seeing or hearing, mobility disabilities, or mental or cognitive disabilities as well, right? If you have a mental illness or a brain injury or something like that, all of these things can create barriers for you in society, right? And it's our job to sort of help figure out what those are and remove those, right? So that people like Sinead, people like Adam, people like Dan can have similar opportunities and experiences as the rest of us, right? Again, ableism is kind of entwined within Western society, and so there are kind of limiting beliefs about what people with disabilities can and cannot do, right? And often, we have this kind of opposing relationship with people with disabilities. We feel that they're not capable of living a regular life or contributing in employment, but at the same time we make movies about them so we can be inspired, right? People who have overcome some sort of accident or disability, and oh, how inspiring, right? It's inspiration porn, right? But again, people with disabilities, their lives are not, less worth living than ours, right? And especially when, good morning, especially when we're able to remove the barriers that, that they struggle to overcome in society, right? Again, society is not built for them. And again, you all came to, not all of you, but you all came to school this morning, and there were all kinds of barriers in your way, but you didn't notice them, right? You just cruised on to school, listening to your music on your phone, walking, taking the bus, taking the SkyTrain, coming up the stairs. Didn't think anything of it, did you? But those are serious barriers. Good morning. Yeah, I think we kind of covered all that. We covered all that. Yeah, and this is one of the things that Sinead was talking about in her TED Talk, is that we need to, we need to have people in minoritized groups at the table when we're coming up with solutions for things. But we also have to design a world that works for everyone, right? And one of the examples I like to use for this, or one of the things that kind of inspires me, is, has anyone seen Zootopia? Animated movie? Yeah. It's kind of the movie's kind of an allegory for racism, right? But the other thing that's going on in it that's really cool is the amount of accommodation that's made for the different animals, right? Because the animals are all different sizes, right? And they have different needs in terms of the climate they live in. And so when you go to Zootopia, what do you see? You see all kinds of different accommodations, right? As soon as Judy Hopps arrives there on the train, the big doors open, but then the little doors open too, right? And the little animals can come out of the train, and so can the big ones. And the city is divided into 4 climate zones so that all the animals can kind of live in a climate that's comfortable for them. And yeah, I know it's an animated film, and it's mostly for kids, but it's an example, right? It's a world that was created to accommodate difference, right? And so, if you can do it on the screen, you can do it in real life, right? It's just a matter of, do we want to, right? Okay, maybe we should have watched Zootopia instead of Mean Girls. No? Yes? No. Okay. So, let's put that away. Nope, that's not what we're going to talk about. Hang on. We're not going to talk about Hitler. Oh, I didn't make a... Hang on, I'm just going to make a PDF of this. Good morning. Okay. PDF. There we go. All right. Next unit is all about sexism, okay? So this is a pretty interesting unit. I think it's one that is certainly a lot more on people's radar than ableism or disableism, right? We saw Adam Pearson go through the street asking people what disableism was, and nobody really knew. But most people know what sexism is, right, and know what it's about. And so we'll talk about really all kinds of things in this unit. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one, I think. Let's start, right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at sexism in the context of illustrating how our ideas and views and opinions about sex and gender are kind of circulate and operate within popular culture. Okay, so there'll be a little more of a focus on popular culture here in this unit. In the last one, in ableism, I think we just touched on it when we said, villains in movies often have facial disfigurements, and that's kind of all we did with popular culture, but here we'll talk about it quite a bit more. First, we need to define some terminology, and this is where a lot of people are confused. And again, sometimes the definitions seem boring, but like if you don't have the vocabulary, if you don't have the terms, it's hard to talk about things that are complicated because people get confused about what's being said, right? So we'll start off with just a few comments, and you can, or on terminology, and you can ask questions as you desire. Okay, so this is important here. So the first thing we're going to define is sex, and not not what you do on Saturday night kind of thing, but this has to do with your biological anatomy and your genetics. Okay, in the context of gender and social justice, in the social justice sphere, we often talk about it in terms of sex assigned at birth, right? Because all of us have a certain sex, right? And it's usually given to us at birth, right? So mom gives birth to you, you come out, doctor looks at you and says it's a boy or it's a girl. Of course, in your in your country's language, of course. But that's often what they say, right? The doctor looks at your little body, at your genitalia, and says, yep, it's a boy, it's a girl, right? And so men and women have different bodies, duh. But they also have slightly different genetics, right? Different chromosomes. And so if any of you have taken bio, you will of course know that human females have two X chromosomes, human males will have an X and a Y, right? And so this kind of creates two biological categories, male and female. It may interest you to know that there are a lot more people that do not fit into either of those boxes than you might think. Okay? So there's lots of people who are born where their genitalia is not kind of entirely female but not entirely male either, so they kind of sit somewhere in the middle. Some people have complex genetics, as maybe they have two X chromosomes and a Y, and so their body may kind of express itself as more female or more male. So again, even though we have basically two biological categories, there's more people in the middle than you might think. And I don't have the actual numbers, the actual statistics, but you would think it would be one or the other, but actually there's more options than that. But mostly for our purposes, let's just focus on male and female here, okay? So when we talk about sex is a biological thing, right? So it has to do with your body and how it kind of looks, but it also has to do with your genetics, right? And the chromosomes that you have. Now, then we have gender. Gender is something a little bit different, okay? Sometimes people use these terms interchangeably, but they're not the same, okay? So gender is kind of an identity or a cultural role, okay? So each of us, I think, if you think about who you are for a second, you kind of know what your gender is, right? Are you a man or a woman, right? Most of us kind of have some sort of internal sense of what that is, right? There's a certain, way it is to be a man or a certain way it is to be a woman, and we kind of know what we are, right? We kind of have some sort of distinctive feeling about that. So we have a gender identity is what I'm saying, right? We all have a specific gender identity. But gender is also a role that we play, right? And so there are all kinds of rules and expectations and social norms around being a man or being a woman in this society or in your home societies. And for the most part, we play that role, right? We follow those rules. Here I am, I've showed up this morning for work, and I'm playing the role of man, right? I'm speaking in a low voice, I have facial hair, I'm dressed like a man, maybe more like a boy, but whatever. I'm dressed like a man, and I'm basically sort of conducting myself as society says a man should, more or less, right? So there's an identity part of this about how I feel, but there's also a role that I play, right? And so society usually figures out what sex we are, so our sex assigned at birth, so it's on our IDs and things like that, and then society will treat us accordingly, right? They'll treat us like men, or they'll treat us like women, or boys and girls when we're young, okay? So gender is a different thing from sex, right? Sex is a biological thing. Gender is a cultural thing, but also an identity thing, right? It's a thing that you feel that you are. Does that make sense so far? All good? Okay. So what we've kind of started talking about recently in Western society here is the difference, not the difference, but yeah, the difference between cisgender and transgender people. Has anyone heard these terms before? The transgender but not the cis? Yeah. So cis and trans are Latin prefixes, I believe. So it goes back to the Roman Empire, or the Romans, really. And cis is something that is close to, and trans is something that is further away, I think. I don't speak Latin. But then nobody does. So someone who is cisgender, well, when we say that, we're talking about someone whose biological sex, so their genetics or their physical body, and their gender identity, how they feel inside, is in alignment. Okay? So here I am sitting up here with an X and a Y chromosome, right? A body that is male, and my internal gender identity, I also know that I'm a man. That's my gender identity. So I'm a cis man, or I'm a cis man, right? So I am in alignment. But a little more recently, it's become safe enough for people in Western society to talk about other ways of being, right? So there are other people for whom their biological sex, their chromosomes, or the way their body kind of physically expresses itself, that's not in alignment with their gender identity, with the way that they actually feel inside, right? And for those individuals, we generally use the term transgender, right? And so it doesn't mean that anything has necessarily changed, right? Because sometimes people imagine that transgender means like transportation, like you've gone from one gender to the other. It's not quite that, right? Again, it comes from the Latin, and it just means that those two things are not aligned, right? You have the body of a man, and yet your gender identity is that of a woman, or vice versa. For some people here, there's people that also feel that they don't fit in either of those categories. So male and female is another, or man and woman is another binary opposition, right? Two kind of opposing things. But there are people who feel that, neither of those really work for me. They don't really describe who I am. I don't strongly feel like I'm this thing or that thing. And so they'll describe themselves as gender non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid. There may be a few more terms around that as well. But again, we've got two boxes, but often some people don't fit into either of them very well, or they don't want to fit into either of them. And so they'll refer to themselves usually as one of those three terms. Questions so far? Is this all new? Is this all old? New, old, sort of? Halfway? Okay. Okay. We'll come back to the transgender thing in a little bit. We'll come back to it in a little bit. The other thing we should pay attention to here is the difference between sexual orientation and sexual identity. Okay. Again, many people want to, here's a fancy word for you, conflate. If you want to sound if if you want to sound very intelligent, use the word conflate, and people will like, oh, really? Conflate is just to like combine or to mistake two things as one, right? So some people will conflate sexual identity or sexual orientation and gender. They'll stick them together when really we should separate them out, okay? So here when we're talking about sexual orientation, we're talking about who people desire as sexual partners, okay? So do you desire people of the same sex? Do you desire people of the opposing sex? Does sex not matter? So either sex is fine with you. Are you not interested in sexual activity at all? All of these things are sexual orientations, right? So we can hear people use words like homosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, demisexual, asexual. Did I miss any? There might be more too. It's because we're just starting to, well, we're not just starting to, but because we're still talking about these ideas in terms of, in terms of how society thinks about this, there's a lot of new words that are coming out, and so there's a lot of different terms. Basil says, yes, I did forget heterosexual as well, which is interesting. But you could say that most people are probably heterosexual. Okay, so I wouldn't say that's the norm, right? Because I think they're all normal, but I would say that that's the majority. And so most people are heterosexual, or at least mostly heterosexual. Now, sexual identity is something a little bit different. Okay, so this is how you present yourself to society. Okay, and sexual orientation has to do with your kind of brain chemistry, right? How, I don't think, you may have different beliefs on this, but, I don't think you can choose your sexual orientation, right? It just kind of is what it is. It's hardwired into you, right? But sexual identity is different. Sexual identity has to do with what your society will allow you to be, okay? So, for instance, if you were a gay man in Canada today, that is a sexual identity that you can have, right? There's lots of gay guys wandering around. The, levels of discrimination and prejudice and violence towards gay men is reasonably low in Canada, right? Most Canadians are pretty cool with that sort of thing. And so that's a sexual identity that you can have in Canada. But if you go back, 150 years, let's say 100 years, it's not a sexual identity that you can have, right? If you try to present yourself to society as a gay man, you will be shunned and ridiculed. You'll be subjected to discrimination and violence, right? There are certain places in the world where that will still happen to you. If you try to present yourself as a gay man, you may wind up in prison or dead. So in societies like that, either in the past or present, gay man is not a sexual identity that you can have, right? And so if you went back 100 years in Canada, you wouldn't see any gay men walking around. But did they exist? Of course they did, right? But they weren't allowed to express themselves, right? The only sexual identity that was available was heterosexual, right? Straight man. And so that's the identity that they presented to society. They pretended to be straight men, but indeed they were not. So, again, sexual orientation is not the same as sexual identity, and neither of those two are really the same as gender, but I'll come back to that in a second too. Yes. So how you express your sexual orientation has to do with your society and culture, right? And what's allowed, right? What's considered proper and what's considered improper. Oh yeah. So here's a neat little graphic, and I like this graphic because it's cute and it's colorful, but also it separates out a lot of things that are kind of worth paying attention to about people, right? So the first thing here we started out with was the purple one, biological sex, right? And for the most part, most of us fall into either one category, male or female, but again, there are people that don't fit in either category very well, and more of them than you might think. We also talked about people's gender identity, right? So how you kind of feel. Do you feel like a super manly man? Do you feel like a super feminine woman? Or do you feel like, you know, maybe somewhere in the middle, or, you know, maybe those gender roles don't really, neither of them feel really right to you, right? Gender expression. So this has to do with how you, I guess, how you express yourself as a woman or a man, considering what society believes men and women should be. Okay? So you can have a biological sex, you can have a gender identity, but then there's how you express that gender to society, right? And again, that's just like sexual identity, right? That will depend on if society is safe, right? If you're allowed to express yourself a certain way. If you're a trans man, right? If you're a trans man living 100 years ago in Canada, you're not going to express yourself that way, right? You're going to express yourself as your sex assigned at birth, right? Because that's the only safe thing to do. But it doesn't mean that's who you are. We have sexual identity here at the bottom. So are you attracted to women or females or femininity, or are you attracted to men or males or masculinity, or maybe both, or maybe neither, right? There's those things. And then there's people that are also romantically attracted to either one gender or the other, or both, right? So kind of what I'm trying to drive home here by looking at this is that people are complicated, right? And some of these things that we think are connected are not necessarily, right? So I think it would be safe to say that most people are cisgender heterosexual people who are sexually attracted to the opposite gender and also romantically attracted to the opposite gender. I think that's probably the majority. I don't know how big of a majority it is, but I think that's probably most people. But again, there's a lot of people for whom these situations are less straightforward, right? People may have different gender identities, gender expressions, different sexual identities and orientations, and we're only, here in Western society anyway, we're only just now starting to talk about some of these ideas. And so, again, what I'm trying to say here is that when you look at someone, you can't necessarily assume that you know that much about them, right? Again, most people are probably, you know, the standard cisgender heterosexual person, but not everybody is, right? And that's okay, right? That's a normal thing. Any questions so far? Things you want to ask or add or mention? Okie dokie. Yes. The alien. So, I have a little activity assignment for you to do that I would like you to do. But maybe what we'll do first is we'll have a little break and just kind of refresh our heads, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the alien. Okay. All right. Take 10. I'll see you in just a little bit. Okay. Okay. And we are back. So, what on earth is this alien doing in front of us? I would wonder. Well, this is going to be part of a little activity slash assignment that I'm going to give you, okay? So here is the scenario. Here is the scenario. Imagine this, if you will, okay? So I'm going to ask you to, you can work in little groups of 2 or 3 at the beginning here, and what I'm going to ask you to do is imagine this. So an alien, a creature from outer space, comes and lands in your group, okay? And the alien is here to study human beings, okay? It's here to study us and see what we're like and figure out what humans are. Now, the alien, 2 things about the alien. So the alien can change into different shapes, okay? So it can change itself to look like a human woman or a human man. So it can just blend into society. But the alien also comes from a society where gender does not exist, okay? So although the alien can sort of shape shift and it can look like a woman or a man, it doesn't really know how to act like either of those things. And so your job here at the beginning is going to be to try to come up with a list of rules to tell the alien how it should act like a boy or a man or a girl or a woman, okay? Because again, the alien doesn't know, and it's one thing to look like a woman or a man in society. That's one thing, but you also have to act like one as well, right? Otherwise people will, catch on to the fact that there's something strange about this person, right? So we have to help this alien blend in as easily as possible, okay? And so in order to do that, we have to give it some instructions in terms of how to act like a woman or how to act like a man. Make sense? Okay. So what I'd like to do is give you maybe, 8 minutes or so. You can talk amongst yourselves in pairs or groups, whatever you want to do. And I want you to come up with as many rules as you can. So I'm just going to make an assumption about everyone's gender here, so hopefully you don't mind. But guys, I'll ask you to come up with rules for how to act like a man, and women, I will ask you to come up with rules of how to act like a woman. Okay? So young women, you can work with each other. Young men, you can work with each other. Come up with as many rules as you possibly can in about 8 minutes. Can we do that? Okay. So, go to it. I'm going to put some time on the clock, and I'll float around and see how you're doing, okay? There's 8 minutes. It will be easier for you if you write them down or type them out. Right, so be gentle, stick with the legs together or crossed, not. Yeah. That's very non-feminine, that's right. You guys get settled. Sorry, yes.
Do we just choose a boy or a girl?
Yes. So you choose guys, okay? So you're an X. You're both X
you do that?
Don't talk at the viewer.
No, don't do that.
Don't be confident.
Yeah.
Don't keep beside someone.
Good, yeah.
Always leave a space.
Yes, unless absolutely necessary.
Do we need to write it down?
Yeah, I would type it out for yourself, yeah. Type it out for yourself. Yes, don't do that. No talking.
That's the weirdest thing that I can do.
I know. Standing there, so how's it going? Okay, yeah, that's a good one, yeah. You should play sports, that's good.
Be better at sports.
Never been Binghamton?
Don't cook. My
Okay.
dad don't fight today with these.
That's okay.
That's okay. We gotta figure out the rules, right?
Talk. What? Loud, be confident, low voice, right? Low, right? How do you walk? How do you walk?
Like a boss. Walk like a
Okay. Going to ask me, are you okay? You know what you're doing?
Try for me. Before.
Oh, yeah? Right? Yeah, Yeah, we need, and I say should though. It should be. Okay. Right. Oh, okay, so there are certain occupations that are more mentioned about the pig. Never fits by 50 cents. It's very feminine. Hairstylist. One thing, right? Yeah, we try to think about again, the sort of like societal norm. Like what are women supposed to like? Even if it doesn't apply to you. Because I know, like for men I know, men are like supposed to watch sports, right? They're supposed to go on Saturday, they're supposed to be sitting out with beer and watching a football game. But I know that's the rule, right? That's what you're supposed to like. Like any kind of supposed to like. Yeah. And it's okay if you do, of course, but yeah, women are supposed to like to shop.
Beside other people.
Yeah, could be. Could be.
Goodness.
Again, I was
Oh, okay, but yeah, sure.
what kind of
careful.
No, no, okay. Like, one guy, yeah, I don't know, I don't get it. Why?
I think the view with the voice is my favorite one.
Oh, with a Z. I mean, the Z. Use the O and the I survive in a while. You guys do that?
But what I mean is, nobody is going to use everything. I went for a course once, back in, I was floating on an island for 3 days.
Oh, cool.
Caught my own frog, killed it.
You eat a frog?
Yeah. I didn't have a choice. It was either the frog or like, what else? It was covered in mud, so the frog was the penis. I was like, I'll do that. Yeah. It's really good.
I wouldn't have thought so. What about in terms of your relations with women? How should you interact and relate to them?
Yeah, you're a good listener.
Yeah. Yeah, guys are renowned for their listening. Their listening capabilities.
Trying to build the perfect alien.
Okay, okay. Okay, I hear that.
No lose eye contact with talking.
It's true.
Maintain eye contact. Pay on the first date. I never do it. Pay on the first date. He got knocked out, but Floyd, like, Logan got knocked out, but Floyd carried him back up just to keep the fight.
No one wants.
I mean, it was an exhibition. I mean, they both won, and they walked away with $10 million each.
Lots and lots of rules. How should you talk? How should you sit? How should you walk? How do you interact with people of the same gender? How do you interact with people with another gender? What kind of things should you be interested in? What kind of things should you not be interested in? What should you never ever do as a man or as a woman?
Wait. Go back to the
Well, I mean, I think in a lot of ways we
always back up your boy in the fight. Always back up your boy in the fight even though he's wrong.
You know, listen to that, like, shake hands. Shake hands.
like getting it on like you don't want to follow those rules. That's okay. So like look good, but look like you didn't put too much work in. Why? What's wrong with putting too much work in?
You gotta look after this.
You gotta look good.
It's not like putting too much.
Yeah, women would say that too, but the difference is that it's not effort.
Yeah, it's $5.
It's a lot of effort.
I don't know, just put 1 hour.
I mean, for us, it's probably 5 minutes of putting clothes on, maybe 20 minutes of doing the hair.
Sniffing it, make sure that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Make sure you get the right amount of clothes on.
Yes. And the right amount is keep it respectable, guys.
3 sprays.
I don't wanna know, I don't wanna like get in an elevator and know you were there like 7 minutes ago. That's too much. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. 1, 2,
3 in the back.
you don't put it on the phone.
Okay, think more of rules that apply just to men, okay? Because a lot of those could apply to women too.
Yeah, I felt like.
So that means we need to choose men or
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just put one here, one here.
That means
I'm
should
gonna
we
put
do
it in that.
right now we need to focus on men.
Carlo wants to pour.
I feel like the back makes it. The back makes it good. Don't be a high beast. Don't be a high beast. Fucking set the shit out there.
All this 2 minutes.
Go to the gym later.
Right?
Or do exercise.
Oh, yeah, you've gotta.
Have a big fun.
Ah. So like, how is that? What's that? Yeah, I don't know how to do that. My girlfriend is trying to do that.
When a boy chooses a dark tone,
Don't talk too much.
or you can go a dark like a red tone.
So the like the shoes kind of encourage you to walk. I'm pretty sure if I put on a pair of heels, I don't think you'd see how. Like a giraffe on roller skates.
Or you can go a team.
You want to get it? Yeah, it was fun. Alright, then it's good.
Take shit off every time.
What's the point of that? Somewhere.
Oh, we can go.
Boy, team,
Okay. What should men kind of strive for their body to be like?
Like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but with more muscle.
Try to look like a professional fighter. Try to look like a professional fighter. As long as they build just like that. Don't wear skinny jeans if you're skinny. Don't wear skinny jeans. Yeah, just say no skinny jeans.
Okay, good people. Can we talk about some of these?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. How about ladies first, okay? Because that's a societal norm. So let's see what some of the rules are for how is this alien going to act like a girl or a woman? How should it do that? Yeah, tell me, give me everything you got, and online people, you can give me what you got too. Okay, so when you sit, no man spreading, right? Sit with legs together, legs crossed. Yeah, no legs apart. Okay, good start. What else? Okay, so if you're wearing a skirt, which might be a rule too, wear a skirt. Push it down before you sit down. Good. What else? Oh, okay. So if you have to go to the washroom, that you should go in with other girls. You should go in a group. Why? I have no idea, but you should do it because that's what everyone else does. Reza says you can color your hair. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. What else you got?
The other one doesn't have to be necessary too, but like me. So we are trying to grow up looking presentable for men to like us. So we're like trying to get men's attention and responsibility.
Okay. Okay, so there's this rule about presenting yourself in a way that men will pay attention to you. How should the alien do that? How should it dress like a woman so that men will pay attention to it? What's that? Okay. The hair, the nails, the face, right? Maybe, moisturize, makeup, type of clothes, okay. Okay, what else? What else you got?
They're supposed to like the women to shop.
Okay. So desirable hobbies might be shopping, right? Shopping might be something that this alien woman should do. What else? Zartaj says here that as a lady, the alien can, wear makeup and a dress, and a handbag on the shoulder, right? A purse of some sort, that works. Sean says high heels. High heels are very feminine. Yep. What else you got, ladies?
There's a specific type of job that women are supposed to do.
Oh, specific. Okay, so maybe.
Feminine jobs.
So the woman should have a feminine job, right? So to go with her feminine clothing, her feminine way of sitting, her feminine hobbies like shopping. What kind of job should a woman have?
Nurse.
Nurse, okay.
Receptionist.
Receptionist. What's that? Oh, elementary teacher. Yeah, okay.
The ones that
Oh, right. Yeah. So women really shouldn't, and all of the shoulds and shouldn'ts have quotes around them here. But yeah, they shouldn't do like hard manual labor, right? They should do soft jobs. Okay, what else?
Usually women have to do certain desires so they have to get married before a certain age.
Oh, interesting. So can I split that into two? So women have this kind of societal pressure to get married and get married by a certain age, because after that age, what happens?
Menopause.
You're not desirable anymore. Ouch. What age is that, by the way?
I don't know, I don't like this one.
Yeah, well, you don't have to like any of these rules, anybody, but it's interesting to think about them. So yeah, there's a point where maybe society feels that women are undesirable, right? Eek. What else? Other women's rules? How should women interact with the opposite sex? How should women interact with men?
How they're supposed to interact with men?
Yeah. Are there rules?
But they shouldn't be too upfront or too open in all ways. Yeah.
So you have to kind of be guarded a little bit, not too upfront, not too open.
Yeah. Because women usually like in society like are they have to protect themselves from men and like family usually protect the women from the outside
Yeah, like to a certain extent, maybe you guys would disagree with me, or maybe you would, but in terms of like relationships and relationships that start off, it's supposed to be up to the man to initiate, right? The man is kind of the pursuer, right? And the woman is the pursued. Is that often how it's supposed to be? Kind of, yeah. And I'm not, heavy quotes, but yeah. So women have to be kind of a little bit on guard, right? Because they might be approached and pursued by men, right? So they've got to be ready to sort of block off anyone who's, undesirable, right? So yeah, a little bit guarded, a little bit kind of, yeah, not so open. What else? Does anyone else have some feminine rules they want to throw in, even if you're a guy? And our panel can judge whether they're accurate or not.
I'm good.
Huh?
I'm good.
You're good.
Okay, so there's the alcohol tolerance that women are expected to have a low alcohol tolerance compared to men.
They're supposed to have a low alcohol tolerance? Oh, okay. Yeah, so women. Is it a rule like women shouldn't drink too much, or should
I mean, we just
get drunk from less?
I think that's a stereotype.
we just state the rule, man. It doesn't have to be.
Are there certain types of drinks that women should drink?
Yeah, like classy things like wine or classy stuff. Yeah, not the
Margarita.
So like classy stuff like wine, or like fruity drinks, maybe colorful drinks with umbrellas and plastic monkeys hanging off the side. I don't know.
I like those drinks.
I know, me too. Okay, what else? What else should women do, or
Oh, I have one.
yeah?
Like, you get a new drink when you go to the toilet at a club or something. Like, don't drink from the same cup.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
leave it alone.
Interesting. So if you're at a bar or a club, don't leave your drink unattended. Yeah, why not?
Men.
Yeah, well, they're people can put things into your drink, right? So women have to be extra careful at a bar to make sure that they don't leave their drink alone, right? Guys, probably not so much, right?
Could still happen.
Could still happen, but the odds are far lower, far lower. Other rules for women.
Yeah, like usually our apparently show our availability, which is not true. So they are less the alien wants to be less than 5 minutes should less moderate.
Right. So this is an interesting one. The idea that can we say the sexier you dress, the more available people will think you are. And again, you don't have to like or agree with that, but is that that's how it works, right? Yeah. So if this alien doesn't want too much male attention, they should not dress too sexy or too revealing. Okay. Guys, do you have to worry about that? Not so much? You don't worry about dressing in a way that you will be too appealing to women?
Yeah, I worry about that all the time.
I know, right? It's like, how can I make myself more appealing, right? Okay, that's an interesting difference between the two, but that's an important rule as well. What else? Are there any rules about this? Zartaj mentions, girls flirting with boys. Is there any rules for flirting here that this alien should know about? That guy's gonna get a big surprise when it turns out to be an alien, but anyway. What?
Yeah, actually, I want to know.
Yeah. Is this gonna turn into like a clinic on flirting?
I don't know. If you want advices, like
How should women flirt? How should the alien flirt?
Yeah,
I
just
don't know. They just first
saying
you
hi is good
tell,
enough.
Don't be open.
Okay.
Don't, like come straight and be like I like you. Probably just
Yeah, because would you say that for the woman alien, the woman alien doesn't want to pursue too much, right? The woman doesn't want to be too kind of desperate, but the man, it's okay for them to
Be desperate.
maybe not to be desperate. Nobody likes desperation, but pursue a little bit, right? Do you think that's true? Is the man expected to make the first move?
Yeah.
Usually, not always, but usually. So women, maybe it's like don't make the first move, right? Let them come to you rather than you going to them, right? Maybe. Again, you can break all of these rules if you want, but that's just the rule.
Another thing is the people expect the woman to be housekeeper or to the children more than
Okay, so you may have you may be expected to be kind of the domestic in the home person, right? Taking care of the house or the meals or the kids, right? You might have that expectation. What else? Other rules for women? There are many. Don't go out at night alone. Okay. Good. And what? That's all? Any last rules for women that should be added? Okay. So we've only got a few minutes left. We'll have to continue this tomorrow. But I want to hear the man list tomorrow, okay? So we can try to remember what we've learned from women. We'll talk about men, and then again, I have some other questions for you to answer as an assignment, but we're okay for now. We just need to talk about the rules for being a man tomorrow, okay? So I'll let you pack it all up, and we'll finish this tomorrow, okay? All right. Yeah.